Skyward Sword HD is releasing soon, and I think it might be an interesting transition for fans of the series that started with Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild sold 10 million more copies than the next best-selling game in the series, Ocarina of Time, so it's pretty safe to assume that for a lot of people, Breath of the Wild is the only Zelda game that they've ever played. And Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword are different, to say the least. Now, I love both of these games, but they are each a totally different and unique experience. So for any of you newer Legend of Zelda fans, I want to let you know what you can expect from Skyward Sword HD, and for you more seasoned players, I want to give my analysis of two games that have sort of sandwiched each other. That is not easy to say. And for you more veteran fans, I want to give an analysis of two games that have sort of sandwiched each other in terms of releases. I'm Nintera, and I post a new Legend of Zelda video every single Wednesday, so if you want to be notified when those get uploaded, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I will also avoid any Skyward Sword spoilers in this video for you fans that might be playing Skyward Sword for the first time in July when it comes out for the Switch. With that, let's get into the video. So first, of course, there are some similarities between both of these games, and anyone that's played Skyward Sword will have been able to see references to this game while they were playing Breath of the Wild. The most obvious similarity between these games is that these are the only two games in the Legend of Zelda franchise that have a stamina wheel. The stamina wheel in Skyward Sword, of course, came first, but Breath of the Wild expanded on the mechanic a lot, and I actually think of the stamina wheel in Skyward Sword as being sort of a test run for the one in Breath of the Wild. Skyward Sword also had breakable shields, which was sort of the precursor to the breakable weapon mechanic in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, we also see locations and imagery that we saw first in Skyward Sword. One of the most obvious references is the goddess statues, which are littered all over the world in Breath of the Wild, and are clearly modeled after the giant goddess statue in Skyloft. The springs in Breath of the Wild are also designed to look just like the ones in Skyward Sword. You can see that we have the same long hallway layout, the sconces on the pillars along the walkway, and just the fact that these locations are springs. There's also a reference to Fi, who was our companion all throughout Skyward Sword. Fi is the spirit of the Master Sword, and she makes this sound every time she emerges from the Master Sword to talk to Link. So now that we've gone over all of that, let's take a look at this cutscene from Breath of the Wild. So Fi is still in the Master Sword, even after thousands and thousands of years, which is good to know. And if you haven't played Skyward Sword, you might think that this is a cool, subtle reference that might be easy to miss. No, it's not. You don't even have to play Skyward Sword through one whole time to have this sound burned into your brain for the rest of time. I had not played Skyward Sword for a good amount of time when I played Breath of the Wild, and when I saw that cutscene, I knew exactly what it was right away. So if you haven't played Skyward Sword, I would highly recommend playing it and then going back to Breath of the Wild so that you can find and appreciate all of these references for yourself. So there are clearly some similarities and references between these two games, but the biggest thing I want to talk about is their differences. I think that Legend of Zelda fans who have only played Breath of the Wild might be really surprised to learn just how different these two games are. First is Breath of the Wild's open world, which you can explore and experience in pretty much any order that you want. Skyward Sword is not that way, to say the least. Skyward Sword is separated into 3 disconnected regions on the surface that you can only reach from the sky, and each of those regions is explored in a very specific way. Skyloft, though, is amazing, and there are some really unique side quests to be found there. All of these areas are absolutely beautiful, and I think that the art style in this game is just perfect. I can't wait to see it in HD. Another large difference between these games is the way that the story is told. In Breath of the Wild, the majority of the story is told through flashbacks that can be experienced in any order, and the world as a whole doesn't really change much during the game. You accomplish different milestones, but you could theoretically complete the entire game without doing any of them. The game is essentially just Link getting stronger and stronger until he's ready to face Ganon. There's no story that you follow from stepping out of the Cave of Resurrection to reaching Hyrule Castle and defeating Ganon. On the other hand, Skyward Sword is arguably the most story-driven game in the Legend of Zelda franchise. It's very linear, and there is always a clear direction for Link to go in next. We see the world change a lot throughout the game, and different story elements become available depending on how far you've gotten. Skyward Sword's story is the best part of the game, and there is so much lore of the Legend of Zelda franchise explained during it. And your girl loves some good video game lore. Skyward Sword, of course, has tons of other elements that make it different from Breath of the Wild, like being able to give Link a different name, dungeons, varied bosses, iconic music, stuff like that. But those are all things that every other Legend of Zelda game has, so I'm not going to go over those so much today. So, should you play Skyward Sword if you're a fan of Breath of the Wild? The short answer is yes, of course. If you love the world of Hyrule, this game will give you so much more backstory on the Triforce, the goddesses, and the history of the land. If you love the characters, Skyward Sword explains why Link and Zelda are who they are and where Ganon comes from. And this game has tons of other great characters that are so fun, and even some more you'll recognize like Beetle and Impa. If you love the combat, if you love the puzzle-solving elements, Skyward Sword has some really unique ones that fit in so well with the theme of each of its dungeons. So if you get the chance, I would absolutely recommend giving Skyward Sword a try, because I think that it's a really solid and very important entry in the series. So how do you feel about Skyward Sword? Are you excited for the HD version coming to the Switch in just a couple months? Also, let me know in the comments down below if Breath of the Wild was your first Zelda game, or maybe if it's the only Zelda game that you've played. I would love to know about how your thoughts and opinions about that game as well as other games in the series might differ from mine, since I've been playing Zelda games for like 20 years. And if you want to support the content that I'm making here, go ahead and maybe leave a like on this video. I would really appreciate it. And I make new Legend of Zelda videos every single Wednesday, so if you want to see when those get uploaded, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week. Bye!